Alright guys, so this set of notes will go over some aspects of forensic odontology. Specifically, we are going to look at how bite marks can be used as forensic evidence. So you should have this PowerPoint. As usual, you are looking for what I highlight, or if I write in any extra notes or say things that you need to write down, then the expectation is that you get those things down on your own note sheets. So here we go. Okay, so again, this particular topic of bite mark analysis falls under forensic dentistry or forensic odontology, but we're only looking at the marks left behind by teeth, and that could be in skin. Most often it's in skin, but it can also be on like a certain surface that's soft enough or malleable enough that it would hold on to bite marks or to teeth marks. But again, most often what our forensic odontologist is going to do is he or she is looking at the impressions and bruises left in skin by someone's teeth, and we're going to compare those impressions to an impression created specifically from a certain suspect. Another thing that can sometimes be applied, or another area that's sometimes applicable, is sometimes we're able to lift DNA from saliva, or we are able to lift it from the teeth themselves. So there are times where we utilize DNA, but most often it's just pure impression work. There are other applications where sometimes we would use the dental charts or records of a victim's teeth to kind of figure out who that person was. It's a way of identifying human remains. Some of the more famous cases of this kind of analysis work was, for example, done on the remains that they thought were Hitler's, and they're just going based off of what his dentist had recorded in terms of what his teeth looked like and what the shape of his mouth looked like and his impression looked like. And they were comparing that to bone fragments and teeth fragments that they found at, quote unquote, the site of his death. But there are other applications where we see it actually match up, and it's sometimes the only way that we can decide if the remains that we're looking at actually belonged to a particular person. Like, we can put a name to that body. All right, so let us talk about what a bite mark actually is. So a bite mark is a physical remnant of contact with teeth. It is literally an imaging that, or an impression that the teeth leave behind. And it's normally a representative pattern. It can be left in an object itself, or it can be left in tissue of a person or an animal or something of that nature. We also have a category called cutaneous human bite marks, and that refers to an injury in the skin that is caused by coming in contact with someone's teeth, and it can involve lips or tongue or no lips and tongue, and it just shows a representational pattern of the actual teeth in that person's mouth. So they literally tried to fit the person's entire flesh into their mouth and bit down with all of their teeth, or most of their teeth, hard enough to leave an impression kind of each individual tooth, or at least a mark left behind by each individual tooth. It's a little gross when you think about it, but hey. So in terms of what kind of evidence it is, there is some controversy. So bite marks have been used as individual or exact evidence in the past, but because there's so many ways that you can do this analysis, a lot of experts in the field have started to question how valid this kind of evidence is. So technically it can be individual evidence. Sometimes it's class evidence. Of course, if we can find DNA samples or other kinds of tissue samples that we can pull DNA from, then it definitely becomes individual evidence. But just the mark itself can be individual, but like I said, it's sometimes questioned just because there's so many ways that we can analyze it, and it kind of differs from person to person. So there are about 76 different points of comparison that we utilize or are utilized when running bite mark analysis, and they can include all kinds of things, but the most common ones are a comparison of like the number of teeth in that person's mouth as compared to left behind in the mark, the position of the teeth. So if teeth are turned out or turned in or just slightly crooked, that would leave behind a very specific type of pattern. We can look at chipped teeth. Chipped teeth would also leave behind a specific kind of pattern. We could look for missing teeth or the distance between each individual tooth. We can look at the size of the person's mouth. So there's a lot of things that can be compared on these particular marks, and it's just a lot of them. And just depending on who runs the analysis, you know, it can be questionable. The error rate is pretty high in this form of evidence. And when we say error rate, meaning actually matching up someone's bite mark to that actual person's teeth or jaws, like their actual teeth, compared to the marks that they leave behind in someone's skin. So the error rate is about 63%, which is really high, especially for forensic work. And again, that's because there's so many ways to do this analysis and because the technique varies from expert to expert. Okay, so if it's so invalid, or you know, there's so many areas where mistakes can be made, why do we still use this form of evidence? Why is it still useful? Well, we can use it to, especially if we have that person's actual pattern. So just to kind of compare. And this kind of evidence really should not just stand on its own. It's really kind of a, I'm going to use this to confirm, or I'm going to use this to eliminate the identity of a suspect. Very rarely does it happen that a case is solved wholly and solely on just bite marks. It's going to just be another form of evidence or another piece of evidence gathered and built against the suspect. All right, so this is a mock-up of a person's open jaws. There are a couple of things I want to point out. So you are looking at the jaws as if they were pulled all the way back, like they weren't hinges connecting them. So we're going to draw a line here, and this is going to be the person's upper jaw. Okay, so top teeth. Whoops, sorry, that's really bad handwriting, but anyway. And this down here is going to be the person's lower jaw. Okay, so all of these teeth have individual names, and a lot of them are the same names repeated over and over again, and we just add positioning titles to them. But I'm going to point out the ones that you are most familiar with. So these two right here would be your front top teeth. Which means that these two down here would be your front bottom teeth. Okay, and these are called the incisors. So you actually have 4 incisors. The 2 that I've bracketed off on the top and on the bottom are called the central incisors because they're right there in the middle of your mouth. And then this is an incisor, and that is an incisor. This is, and that is. So you have 4 incisors total. I'm going to make a little key off to the side. Okay, so again, that would be this guy, this guy, this guy, that guy. Okay, and these are what we call your biting teeth. Like this is what you would use when you bite into your hamburger or bite into a piece of chicken or whatever. So they leave pretty distinctive marks, and they're also fairly big, especially those central teeth tend to be fairly big. Then on either side of your incisors, you have your canine teeth. Some people call these the eye teeth, but these are your tearing teeth. I'm going to switch colors. Okay, so that would be here on the top and here on the bottom. Okay, our next grouping, whoops, sorry. I shifted everything. There we go. Our next grouping are our premolars. So that would be 1, 2, because you have 2 sets. So we have like first premolar and second premolar. Okay. Okay, and then we have our molars. And we have first molar, second molar, and then wisdom teeth. But we're just going to call all of them molars right now. Whoops, sorry. Oh, geez. Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay, so now we have molars. Okay, so that would be these. Yeah, okay. Now there are different times at which these teeth come in. Like for example, for the most part, by the time you're 6 years old, you have your first molar. By the time you're 12 years old, you have your second molar. Sometimes wisdom teeth don't come in until forever. Like I don't think I got my wisdom teeth in until I was like in my 20s, like 21 or 22 or something. So it just kind of depends. But for the most part, we can kind of even like look at age and tell how many teeth you should have. So the premolars to the molars leave very distinctive patterns because they're the ones that have the grooves, because these are our teeth that are designed for grinding our food, for chewing our food. Canines also leave pretty distinctive marks because they are pointier on the ends, because there are teeth that are designed for tearing. And incisors also leave pretty distinctive marks. They tend to be bigger across the board, like just in terms of width, but they don't take up as much space. And it's because these teeth are our biting teeth. So yes, I expect you to know where they're found. I expect you to know what they're used for, because I kind of just said that. So one more time, for those of you who didn't hear me, your incisors are used for biting, like biting food. Your canines are used for tearing food. And your premolars and molars are used for chewing and grinding your food. In terms of the actual analysis, you are pretty much looking for anything that is a unique feature between that bite mark and between the castings from the suspects. Those castings are called exemplar castings. If you think of the word exemplar, it sounds like example. So literally it's an example of this person's teeth. And the features can be, all kinds of different things. But in class, these are pretty much the ones that we're going to pay attention to. We're going to look at gaps. We're going to look at rotation. So like the angle that the tooth sits at, if it doesn't sit perfectly straight. We're going to look at the size of the teeth. For example, the width of the tip of the tooth. And then we're going to look at the distance from tooth to tooth, from cuspid to cuspid or molar to molar. And that gives us some indication of the size of the person's mouth. Okay, so these are the things that we are looking for evidence-wise, or at least this is the information we can gather evidence-wise from bite mark analysis. You are looking for how unique the biter's teeth are, and you're going to compare all of those unique features to the actual pattern. So it's going to be the pattern left behind in the skin compared to the pattern left behind, or compared to the example casting of the person's mouth. And if you're unfamiliar with what a casting is, think of when you've been to the dentist, especially if you've had like braces or a filling or something, or like you've gotten a cap or you've gotten a tooth replaced. They put that goopy kind of purpley grayish stuff in a tray and they make you bite into it and it kind of oozes everywhere, and they let it sit there for like a minute or two, and when they pull it out, there is a perfect print of your teeth in that goopy material. So that's what the exemplar casting looks like. Now what this tells us, pretty much it's one of these three things. Either the person did not do the biting, so based on these patterns, this person is excluded, or the person kind of likely did this biting because there are some similarities between what you saw on the actual bite versus what you saw on the person's cast. And then there's, without a doubt, the person did this biting. And that's normally a combination of it matches up, like the bite mark matches up to the casting, but also because you have a witness, or maybe even the victim still alive, and they can testify to say, yes, this is the person that bit me. So I have proof because this person is saying, yes, I witnessed this, but then I can also see the markings match up on the actual analysis. Now, even though teeth can be very, very different mouth to mouth, normally this form of evidence just kind of excludes people. It rules people out as a possible suspect more often than it says this person is a suspect because of bite marks. So like I said before, it's rare that a case is wholly and solely solved based on bite marks, but it will help to build evidence or to build a case against a particular suspect. Okay, so in terms of how the bite mark is actually analyzed, there are 20 different methods for analysis. So there's 76 different things to compare, but there are 20 different methods for analysis. The most common ones and the ones that we will use in class are the kind of the 5 that we've listed. So you can compare an acetate overlay of someone's like pattern to study models or to a life-size photograph of the actual wound. So what that means is we're going to take a piece of material that is transparent. We are going to trace this person's more unique features off of their actual cast, and then we are going to lay that transparent piece of material over a picture of the actual bite mark, and that picture is going to be life-size, and then we're going to see if those different patterns match up. So that's kind of what is being shown here in this bottom picture. We can also compare study models to a life-size photograph of the wound. So we can take the person's actual casting and put it back on top of the picture, or put it back on top of the picture and see if those points match up. We can compare an acetate overlay to bites that are done in wax or a photograph of the wound. So with this one, we would create the acetate by taking these bite marks in wax, and then we would compare it to the actual picture. Then another method would be, again, to take that acetate, and again, the word acetate in this case just means a transparent piece of material. So think transparency, like you're probably too young for transparencies, but it's like a sheet of paper, but it's completely transparent. It's plasticky. But yeah, so we can take these acetates and again trace out the more unique features and then lay them on top of the bite mark. And we would use x-rays for that. So we would get the patterns for the acetate from an x-ray. And then we can also take an acetate and use a photocopy of the study models to make all those different points of comparison and then lay it on top of the actual photograph of the wound. So what you guys are going to do is really more like number 1, where you are going to create your own acetate. You're going to make your own bite mark pattern, and then we're going to match them up and see where we can see differences or similarities. Okay, so here's some sample pictures of what sample data or sample analysis would look like. Over here on the left, this is your photocopy, but it's a photocopy of, actually I think this might be an x-ray. Now that I think about it, hold on. Yeah, sorry, this is an x-ray over here on the left. So of the person's actual jaws, but if we had done like a model, it would look pretty much the same way. And then over here on the right, this is the acetate. So they've taken this transparent piece of material and they've like marked out the shapes, they've marked out the shapes of the unique features of that person's teeth. And then they would take this and put it on top of that to see if it matched up or not. Okay, and on here we have some